What's up, I'm Adam from Tainted Rumble TV, and welcome to the post-mortem of Dungeon Dashers, or at least the current build of Dungeon Dashers. I just completed the series. I do have a first impressions on it, and the link for that will be in the description below. This is a more complete look at the game, and my opinions on it, and what I think of the game so far, of what I've played of it. I am going to name a lot of negative things, or at least it seems like I'm going to name a lot of negative things, but I really do like the game. I'm not trying to be mean, it's still a work in progress, and I'm trying to give critique to it, really. So, I'm going to start off on the positive side. I like the characters. Each character feels strong in different aspects, and also weak in different aspects, and the enemies are really well thought out. There are things that bother me about the enemies and the characters, but that will be for later on in the video. I love the art style of it, and I like the choices for the art style because it really does give a retro kind of turn-based strategy game to it kind of feel, which it is a fast-paced turn strategy game, but it kind of gives it retro feel, like it could have been made back in like the 90s, like an early game for DOS or something. I don't know, but I do have my problems with it, and that's where I'm going to say now. One thing I don't really like is kind of the game piece animation for the characters. Is it feels really out of place, especially for the rest of the game. Like, no other part of the game really gives you a feeling of a board game. It doesn't feel like you're sitting there playing a board game. So the kind of game piece movement animation seems out of place, and it's something minor that kind of bothers me, and movement in games kind of bother me a lot. Like, if it doesn't feel smooth, if stuff doesn't mesh correctly, it's going to feel weird for the player, and it's something you kind of need to work on, and I think he's said that he's not going to change it, and that's fine. It's just, I think it feels out of place. Another thing that bothers me is right now in the current build, there is little to no story. There's story for the first 2 minutes of the game through a quick animation and a lot of dialogue, which is perfectly fine. Dialogue and text is a great way to convey a story, but too much of it can kind of bore the player, and I even said that in the first video of it. I kind of just skipped through it and went on, and the story itself, it doesn't get fleshed out throughout the rest of this build, which is kind of weird, and I feel kind of gypped on that, because I really do like stories in RPGs. I like knowing what's going on and all that, and I hope that more story is added in this part of the game later on. Another thing I don't really like is there's a disconnect between each of the levels, like each section of levels, like the caves and then the forest and then the castle, and hopefully that's something he works on. I feel like you just end up from the caves into the forest and then end up in a castle. There's like no connection there. Maybe have them exiting the cave into the forest, and that be the end of that level. And then the forest, there's a castle at the end that you enter, and then you're in the castle. Another thing that bothers me is some of the dialogue seems really out of place, or just kind of weird, and maybe it's just not my type of humor. One of the first levels, when Ardon and January are talking, you have to use a bell to open a gate, and you have to shoot it with January, and then Ardon starts this dialogue about how kids just start hitting things to solve problems, and January goes on and says something like, "Get with the times, old man, dude," something like that. Just felt kind of out of place for the setting. Don't really like that. Kind of bothered me. And then later on, you have a discussion about architecture in the castle, how all the columns are misaligned and all that, and that's a conversation between January and Sir Jacob. And it feels really out of character for Sir Jacob, especially when you first meet him, and he's talking about finding a wizard and killing the wizard. That's like his goal. And when he finds out Ryder can teleport, he's like, "You're a wizard, I'm going to kill you." And then Ryder's like, "Kinda, no, don't kill me." So it felt kind of out of place. Some of the humor is out of place, and maybe it's just because it's work in progress and the story isn't all fleshed out. But those are kind of a few things I don't like. I do really like the feel of each of the characters. I might have complained a lot about Ryder, but it's mostly because I didn't use him correctly, and he does feel really weak at times, while being strong in other aspects. So Ryder is really strong if you can get him behind stuff, but then you run out of action points to where you can't get out of that situation. So I've had him die to orcs, just kind of grouping up and killing him, but he's also very strong if you can get behind them and just critical hit them for like a turn, maybe 2 at the most. But other than that, if stuff gets him surrounded, he's kind of screwed. Sir Jacob is really strong. He takes a little bit of getting used to, especially getting him to places. But other than that, he's really strong. He's a very good tank. And I like the cleave, I like the charge, and I think the last ability is a defensive ability. I didn't use that yet, and I might go back and play with it, try and figure out exactly what each character is good at and try and play them more effectively, especially for the next part of the series. Ardon is probably the strongest character of the bunch. His fireball is just massive damage, his ice can CC people, and chain lightning just decimates just any weak enemy and even stronger enemies. It's just really strong. He's just a strong character overall. January is very good at picking off people from far away, especially when they're weak, but other than that, she doesn't seem as strong as the others, and I think she needs like a basic attack that isn't melee, because it feels weird for her to just go up and start hitting stuff with a bow, but maybe that's just me. Overall, my first impressions of the game were really good, and it continued throughout the game. Even though I've said a lot of negative things about it, I still really like it. And it's one of those weird games where you find a lot that you don't like about it, but it's still a very compelling game to play. And it's a nice experience. And I really hope that this game does really well, and I hope that he fleshes out some of the problems with it. I know people are having performance issues with it, which he patched. I hope there's a little bit more story in the next few builds, and that it gets fleshed out, and that maybe he steps away from the weird dialogue. That would really help the game, in my opinion, because the dialogue in a game between characters can be really good, and if you set a serious tone and then start adding these jokes, it kind of feels disconnected. Like Borderlands, for example, you know it's trying to be funny the entire time, and all the dialogue between characters in the combat and stuff is meant to be funny and taken not seriously. But this game, it sets the mood as a serious game, and then you have these moments where it's like almost trying to be a humorous game, which, I don't know. I think he needs to kind of decide what he wants to do with the game and then stick to that. Story-wise, I hope the story gets better. I hope it's more fleshed out and all that. Overall, it's a good game. I really like it, and I hope to play more of it. I hope the builds come out soon so that I can play more of it. And it's great. I hope you guys liked the playthrough. I hope you guys can discuss my opinion and maybe be like, well, he chose this for this and this and this. So that's the end of the postmortem for this build of Dungeon Dashers, and I will see you guys in the next episode of whatever you want to watch. Good night.